In 1991, at the Academy Awards, Joe Pesci walked to the podium to accept the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. One of the most fiercely competitive categories that year, looked out at the room and said 5 words. 5. It's my privilege. Thank you. Then he sat down. The speech was so short, so jarring in its contrast to the performance it was rewarding, that people genuinely weren't sure if he was joking. The man who spent an entire movie terrorizing everyone in the room couldn't be bothered to fill 30 seconds. He later said he didn't even expect to win. That one moment tells you everything about what makes Goodfellas different from almost every movie that came before or after it. It doesn't play by the rules. It doesn't give you what you expect. And when you look closely, really closely, neither does the film itself. Today we're going through 15 things about Goodfellas that most people who have watched it a dozen times still haven't caught. Not trivia for trivia's sake. Things that change how you understand what Scorsese was actually building. If you've seen Goodfellas, you know the Copacabana shot. Henry Hill takes Karen on a date. They park outside the Copa, skip the line, walk down a back staircase, through the kitchen, past the busboys and the chefs, through another door, another corridor, into the main room, where a table, just for them, gets set up front and center while Tony Bennett sings live on stage. It's one continuous, unbroken take. No cuts, no edits. 3 minutes and 40 seconds of pure forward momentum. Film schools teach it. Directors cite it. It's been called one of the greatest single shots in cinema history. Here's what they don't tell you. Scorsese didn't plan it. Not like that. The original plan was to enter through the Copacabana's front door, the way any normal date would. But the production was denied permission. The front entrance was off limits. So Scorsese pivoted. He walked the path they were actually allowed to use, and somewhere in that compromise, he realized the back entrance was better. The kitchen, the chaos, the staff looking at Henry with deference, all of it said something a front door never could. Karen doesn't just enter a nightclub, she enters a world. She steps into the engine room of Henry's life and comes out the other side dazzled. Scorsese said in interviews that the entire shot was his seduction of her, and also the lifestyle seducing him. One shot, no cuts, meant to feel like being pulled forward by something you can't quite stop. The cinematographer Michael Ballhaus operated the Steadicam himself for most of that take. They rehearsed it repeatedly before cameras rolled to get the timing right with the staff, who all needed to be in exact positions. And the song, Then He Kissed Me, was playing live from the stage, so the volume had to be managed as they moved closer to it. The whole thing came together because a location manager couldn't get the right door unlocked. The second thing to know involves one of the most quoted exchanges in the film. You know it by 3 syllables. Funny how. Henry Hill tells Tommy DeVito that he's a funny guy. Tommy goes still. Then he slowly, quietly, terrifyingly turns it around. Funny how? Like I'm a clown? I amuse you? And for about 90 seconds, everyone in the room, including the audience, genuinely isn't sure if Tommy is about to kill somebody. The scene was not in the shooting script. It was in no version of the script that any actor on set was handed. Joe Pesci came to Martin Scorsese with the idea based on something that actually happened to him as a young man working in a restaurant in New Jersey. Pesci had told a mobster, a real one, that he was funny. The man's reaction was sufficiently terrifying that Pesci never forgot it. Decades later, he pitched the scene directly to Scorsese. Scorsese agreed, and then, deliberately, he told nobody else. He kept the scene out of the script so that when Ray Liotta and Pesci played the moment on set, the other actors sitting at that table would have no idea what was happening. The confusion on their faces, the sideways glances, the held breath, all of it is real. Those are actual people trying to figure out if what they're watching is dangerous. Liotta knew, Pesci knew, Scorsese knew. Everyone else was genuinely unsettled. The word improvised gets used too loosely in Hollywood. This wasn't 2 actors winging it. It was a fully constructed scene, crafted off-set, intentionally kept secret, then detonated in front of people who had no idea it was coming. Robert De Niro has a reputation for preparation that sometimes tips into obsession. For Goodfellas, he called the real Henry Hill, the man whose life the entire film is based on, multiple times a day during production. De Niro was studying how Hill held objects, how he moved his hands, the rhythm of how he spoke. Hill was still, at that point, inside the U.S. Marshals Witness Protection Program. For the casino scene where Jimmy Conway casually tosses money around while dealing with associates, De Niro refused to use the prop money that had been prepared. He told property master Robert Griffin that fake bills felt wrong in his hands. The weight was off. The texture threw him out of the scene. Griffin went home, came back the next day, and handed De Niro $5,000 of his own personal money. Real bills. And after every single take, Griffin would freeze the entire set. Nobody moved. Nobody left. While he collected and counted every dollar to make sure nothing had walked away. That's $5,000 of a prop master's salary sitting in Robert De Niro's hands while cameras rolled. But the real money story in Goodfellas goes deeper than the cash on screen. Screenwriter Nicholas Pileggi confirmed that Scorsese held an open call, an actual advertised call, for real wise guys to serve as extras on set. Pileggi said Scorsese must have hired like half a dozen guys, maybe more, out of the joint. Men with actual criminal histories, playing criminals on screen, in a movie about real criminals they may have known personally. The mobsters, being thorough professionals, gave Warner Brothers fake Social Security numbers. Pileggi said that to this day, nobody knows how those men received their paychecks. One of the extras, a police detective named Louis Eppolito, who had a small role as a wise guy, was later convicted of carrying out murders for hire on behalf of the Lucchese crime family, the same family the film is about. And Tony Sirico, who went on to play Paulie Gualtieri in The Sopranos, had 28 arrests on his record when Goodfellas was released, compared to 27 acting credits. His resume for much of his career had more charges than credits. Before Ray Liotta and Lorraine Bracco were Henry and Karen Hill, the producers were seriously looking at Tom Cruise and Madonna. That's not apocryphal. Producer Irwin Winkler told interviewers that Cruise was discussed, and producer Barbara DeFina confirmed Madonna was in the mix, to the point that Scorsese went to see her perform in David Mamet's play Speed the Plow on Broadway, specifically to assess her for the part. Liotta had to fight for his role. The producers weren't convinced, and the way he eventually locked it down is a story on its own. At the Venice Film Festival, Liotta spotted Scorsese on a beach and walked toward him. Scorsese's bodyguards stepped in the way. Rather than react with frustration, Liotta calmly said, "I just want to talk to Marty." Scorsese said that was the moment he decided to cast him. Not a screen test, not a formal meeting. A man on a beach who handled a blocked path without losing his composure. Al Pacino was offered the role of Jimmy Conway, De Niro's character, and turned it down, reportedly to avoid being typecast as a gangster after The Godfather. He then accepted the role of Big Boy Caprice in Dick Tracy. Pacino has since said he regrets turning down Goodfellas, and Madonna also ended up in Dick Tracy alongside Pacino. Two people who might have led Goodfellas both ended up in a comic strip movie instead. Liotta, meanwhile, had also been offered a small role in Tim Burton's Batman as Harvey Dent, the future Two-Face, and turned it down to take Henry Hill. That role went to Billy D. Williams. The version of Goodfellas with Cruise and Madonna is not a movie I can picture, and I suspect you can't either. Around the midpoint of the film, Tommy, Jimmy, and Henry stop at Tommy's mother's house in the middle of the night. They're transporting Billy Batts, what's left of him, in the trunk of their car. Tommy's mother gets up, makes them pasta, shows them a painting she's been working on, and the three men sit at her kitchen table eating at 2 in the morning. Tommy's mother is played by Catherine Scorsese, Martin Scorsese's actual mother. She was 70 years old when they filmed that scene. She knew she was in the movie. She did not know there was a body in the trunk. According to the director, she was never told what was supposedly in the car parked outside her character's house, so her warmth, her generosity, her complete unawareness of the gravity of the situation, all of it is natural. She wasn't performing obliviousness. She was genuinely unaware. Almost everything she says in that scene was improvised. The conversation about the painting, the one she describes as one's going east and the other one going west, so what? That was off the cuff. The offer of food, the gentle teasing, the maternal ease. Scorsese let his mother talk, and it became one of the warmest, most quietly disturbing scenes in the movie. The painting Tommy's mother shows them was painted by Nicholas Pileggi's mother, the co-writer of the screenplay. So the dinner scene features Scorsese's mother acting, and a painting made by the co-writer's mother, and nearly every word of dialogue was made up on the spot. Martin Scorsese's father, Charles, also has a cameo. He plays one of Henry's prison associates, the man who puts too many onions in the sauce and catches grief for it. And the parents weren't just decorative. Scorsese has said his parents were on set most days, ironing the actors' period-appropriate shirts and helping with the oversized collars required for scenes set in the 1960s and 70s. Liotta has said that Scorsese personally tied his tie for him before shooting each day, to make sure the knot was exactly right for whatever year the scene was set in. That level of detail, a director on his knees tying an actor's tie, is the same instinct that put his parents in the movie, that put real money in De Niro's hands, that kept the funny how scene out of the script. The film's texture comes from exactly that kind of obsession. The three main criminal figures in the film had their last names changed. Tommy DeVito is based on Tommy DeSimone. Paul Paulie Cicero is based on Paul Vario. Jimmy Conway is based on James Jimmy Burke. The changes are standard, protective, legal, but the alterations to their characters are more revealing than the name swaps. Tommy DeSimone, the real man behind Joe Pesci's performance, stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 225 pounds. Joe Pesci is 5 feet 4. Henry Hill told interviewers that Pesci's portrayal was 90 to 99% accurate in terms of personality, attitude, and volatility, but the physical reality was completely inverted. The real DeSimone was a large, physically imposing man, and his violence was even more extreme and unpredictable than anything shown on screen. Jimmy Burke, Robert De Niro's character, was, by Henry Hill's own account in multiple interviews, a homicidal maniac. De Niro's Jimmy Conway is dangerous and calculating, but the real Burke was responsible for what Hill estimated to be between 50 and 60 murders. The film pulls back considerably from the full picture. And then there's the question of what actually happened to Tommy DeSimone. In the film, Tommy is killed as revenge for the murder of Billy Batts. In real life, Tommy DeSimone went missing in 1979, a year before Henry Hill flipped. The circumstances of his death remain an unsolved mystery. His body was never found. The movie gives Tommy DeVito a final moment. The camera, the gun, the shot firing directly at us. It's theatrical. It's a specific choice. In reality, the man he's based on simply vanished, and nobody was ever charged. Before Goodfellas was ever released, Warner Brothers held test screenings. You put an early cut in front of a live audience, you watch their reactions, you collect comment cards. At one screening in Orange County, California, approximately 70 people walked out before the film ended. Nicholas Pileggi confirmed this. Not a handful. 70 people. The content was too violent. The pace was disorienting. The film didn't give audiences the moral architecture they expected from a crime story. There was no clear redemption, no comfortable punishment of the wicked, no moment where the audience was explicitly told how to feel. Scorsese has said he deliberately structured the film so that Henry Hill's perspective drew you in, made you complicit, made you enjoy the lifestyle right alongside him, and then pulled the floor out. The post-screening note left by one audience member, as later recounted by a producer, was 4 words: F.U. Full stop, no other feedback. The production team was alarmed enough that they hid at a bowling alley after one screening to wait out an angry crowd. Warner Brothers reduced the film's rollout significantly, convinced they had a problem on their hands. When Goodfellas opened in September 1990, it earned $6.3 million in its opening weekend. Respectable, but not dominant. It played slowly, built through word of mouth, and kept going. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars in his original 1990 review and wrote in plain terms that no finer film has ever been made about organized crime, not even The Godfather. The line ran in the Chicago Sun-Times in 1990. Ebert was, at that point, almost entirely alone in that assessment. In the year 2000, the Library of Congress selected Goodfellas for the National Film Registry, the first film from the 1990s to receive that designation. The 70 people who walked out in Orange County are presumably fine. They have no idea. In the film's second act, Spider, a young bar runner played by Michael Imperioli, gets shot in the foot by Tommy for being too slow with a drink. Later, Tommy shoots Spider repeatedly in the chest, killing him. During the filming of that second scene, Imperioli fell backward as choreographed and landed on a glass he wasn't supposed to land on. The glass broke. He cut his hand badly, deep enough to require emergency treatment. Imperioli left the set covered in fake blood with fake bullet holes in his shirt and real wounds in his hand, and went to a hospital in Queens. The emergency room staff looked at a man covered in blood with what appeared to be gunshot wounds to the chest. They were not immediately receptive to the explanation. According to Imperioli, who told the full story on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno in 2000 or exactly 10 years after the film's release, as Scorsese had predicted he would, the hospital staff concluded he was either delusional or in shock. They made him wait 3 hours before treating his hand. Scorsese apparently told Imperioli on set, after the incident, that one day he'd be able to share that story on a late-night show. The implication, one day you'll be famous enough that anyone will care. 10 years later, that's exactly what happened. Imperioli went on to play Christopher Moltisanti in The Sopranos, one of the most watched characters in the history of American prestige television. The word F appears in Goodfellas, across all its variations, approximately 300 times across 148 minutes. That averages out to just over 2 uses per minute. The script as written only called for it 70 times. The remaining 230-plus instances came from improvisation. Joe Pesci is responsible for roughly half of the total count. For context, the word appears 422 times in Scorsese's Casino and 506 times in The Wolf of Wall Street. Goodfellas is restrained by Scorsese standards. The original shooting script opened in a completely different order than the film you've seen. In the screenplay as written, the first scene was Billy Batts celebrating his welcome home party at the bar, the scene that ends with Tommy, Henry, and Jimmy beating him to death. Then came the late-night drive to Tommy's mother's house. Only after that would Scorsese cut to Ray Liotta's "As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster" narration. The opening was restructured during post-production to begin with that trunk scene, the 3 men finishing the job in the dark, the headlights, the moment of grim, silent labor, followed immediately by Liotta's voiceover and the flashback to childhood. The reordering creates a different emotional experience entirely. You begin with consequence, with the weight of what these men have become, and then spend the rest of the film watching how they got there. De Niro, who was already one of the most recognized actors alive when Goodfellas filmed, welcomed Ray Liotta to the world of gangster movies in his own particular way. He placed a fake severed horse head in Liotta's trailer, a direct reference to The Godfather, a way of saying, "You're in the family now." Liotta has described the moment as both terrifying and oddly affirming. The film ends with Henry Hill narrating from somewhere nondescript and anonymous. He's in witness protection. He's an average person now. An average schnook, he calls it. He misses the pasta. He misses feeling like somebody. The film leaves him there, diminished, alive, somewhere in the American suburbs. The real Henry Hill lasted in the program about as long as it takes to describe it. Hill turned FBI informant in 1980 after being arrested on narcotics charges. His testimony led to the arrest and conviction of approximately 50 people from the Lucchese crime family. He received a new identity, a new home, a new life in Omaha, Nebraska. And then he immediately began calling his old criminal contacts. He was arrested on drug charges. He was removed from the program. When Goodfellas was released in September 1990, Hill was already out of witness protection, and rather than keeping a low profile, he started appearing at press events related to the film. He went on the Howard Stern show repeatedly. He released a cookbook called The Wise Guy Cookbook. He sold mob-themed paintings on eBay. He gave interviews. He spent his final years in Topanga Canyon, near Malibu, California, battling alcoholism and giving interviews until the end. He died on June 12, 2012, in a Los Angeles hospital from complications related to heart disease. He was 69 years old. In an interview with The Telegraph in 2010, Hill said he genuinely had no explanation for why he was still alive. "There's nobody from my era alive today," he said. He hadn't survived because he was clever enough. He'd survived because everyone else was already gone. Chapter 11. The Oscar Speech, The 5 Words, and the Man Who Didn't Expect to Win. At the 63rd Academy Awards in March 1991, Goodfellas received 6 nominations: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actress for Lorraine Bracco, Best Film Editing, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor for Joe Pesci. It was up against Kevin Costner's Dances with Wolves, which won Best Picture and Best Director that night. The two films represent almost perfectly opposite visions of what cinema can be, one expansive, sincere, and panoramic, the other dense, skeptical, and kinetic. The Academy's preference that year was clear. Pesci won. He was up against Al Pacino in Dick Tracy, the same movie Pacino chose over Goodfellas to avoid typecasting, which had now landed him in the same category as the film he'd turned down, and Andy Garcia in The Godfather Part 3. When Pesci reached the podium, he said 5 words. "It's my privilege. Thank you." He sat down. The speech was one of the shortest in Oscar history. Pesci later said the brevity was not a statement, not a performance of humility, not a calculated choice. He said he simply hadn't prepared a speech because he didn't expect to win. And that sentence contains a kind of irony the film itself might appreciate. The most terrifying, most volatile, most unpredictable performance in the movie, the character who could never be cornered, never be caught off guard, was accepted by a man who was so caught off guard that he ran out of words. Now here's the one thing I'd put to you. The film ended with Henry Hill diminished and suburban, and real life gave us a version of that story that was somehow even stranger. But the question I'd leave in the comments is this. Does knowing that the real Tommy DeSimone never got the dramatic ending the film gave him, that he just disappeared, no body, no verdict, no final scene, does that make the film feel more honest or less? Does the invented ending give Tommy a kind of dignity the real man probably didn't get? Or does it do him a disservice by pretending the universe closed the loop? Drop your answer below. These are exactly the kinds of things that make Goodfellas worth rewatching. If you want more deep dives into the films where the story behind the camera is just as interesting as the story on screen, subscribe. I'll be here.